We didn't make the decision to be in Vietnam. We made the decision to be soldiers.
We was called to aid a friendly nation, and that's what we did.
Uncle Sam calls, you do your duty. And at that time, we thought that was right.
They fought a whole nother war when they came home.
I first heard about Vietnam, I was on active duty. You've got to hear the stories about what was going on and the counterinsurgency and all the other things about that. So I don't think the country had taken hold of it as such. We in the military understood it because they were taking people out of units, special force units, and they were being sent to Vietnam.
I was probably pretty typical of people in the late 60s. I knew a lot about Vietnam, but was not particularly interested in going, and but then was drafted, and so was married, had one child, and actually another one on the way. So one of my second daughter was actually born while I was in Vietnam, about a month after I got there. I got my draft notice in December of '68. Actually, just before Christmas, good Christmas present. I had kind of hoped the fact that I was married and had a child, and might impact that, but it didn't. I arrived in country on the 3rd of August. Got assigned to the 227th Assault Helicopter Battalion.
Reported in Vietnam, March '67. Joined my unit, the 173rd Airborne Brigade, Company A, and I was given a platoon as infantry platoon sergeant. Got wounded May 21st, 1967. Everything in Vietnam was search and destroy. You searched the area. If you found anything that aided or comforted the enemy, you destroyed it. We came up on a base camp and saw that the campfire was still warm, which meant they had been in the area. And we began to search it out. I instructed a young private to inspect a 55-gallon drum with unpolished rice. Instead of going the proper way, he tilted the barrel and immediately found 2 M26 grenades with the pin pull, as we call a pressure release booby trap. He pulled the drum towards him, and the explosion went in the direction I was walking. In my legs, I was wounded with grenade fragment. I stayed in the hospital. They changed the degree of your injuries, and I stayed in country. And in September, I went back into the field.
I flew into Pleiku. Pleiku's in the Central Highlands, which is about midway of the country, maybe a little bit on the north side. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile. After I'd been there for just a couple of 3 days, this guy came by and he said, Huddleston, come on, go with me. He said, bring your helmet, my flight helmet. So I got my flight helmet and went with him. And we were hovering on a rifle range, a South Vietnamese rifle range. And we got a call on the radio. They called us and told us that we had a medical evacuation to do. And see, I had just gotten in the helicopter. I don't know where the hospital is. I don't know where roads are. I don't know what the radio frequencies are. I don't even know how to call a tower to get back into this field where I am. So this guy that I was flying was a great pilot. His name was Dave Durling. We called him Lurky. So Lurky asked for permission to take off. We just were over there, in 10 minutes at the most, and picked up this guy, and turned out that he was not a combat casualty, he was a snake bite casualty.
I left Easter Sunday of '66 and went to Vietnam. Assigned to 7th Air Force headquarters in Saigon. And we had a little operations detachment. We had 3 airplanes and a helicopter. And we hauled people around Vietnam and all over. The Air Force had a two-star general that was in charge of this Agent Orange spray that they were using as a depollant. And we flew him by helicopter a lot of times to the areas where they were spraying. You know, and this stuff was so bad, it was so strong, and it just turned dense forest into barren land so you could see what was going on. We did that in the mountainous areas of Vietnam mostly.
You got the Central Highlands, and they're small little mountains, like the Ozarks or some of the small foothills of the Appalachians. They're very small. And then you got the rice paddies.
Walking in rice paddies. One of the most sacred commodities over there was foot powder. When we stopped, then you put on your dry socks after drying your feet and putting foot powder on them. But when you got ready to move out, you changed from your dry socks and put back on your wet socks and put the dry socks back in your helmet in the plastic bag and moved out.
In late March, maybe the second night we were there, came under a pretty good bit of mortar fire. I don't know how many mortars, but a lot over a period of several hours. So I had gone down to really check on the supplies. We'd get what they call leakers. We call them leakers. The bladders were rubber, and sometimes they would get hit with shrapnel or bullets or whatever, and they'd leak, and you'd end up with jet fuel all over the ground. And so I kind of got caught out in the open, and the mortar hit fairly close. I remember becoming aware that I was on the ground and that I was bleeding real bad. I had a lot of blood on me, and I could taste blood in my mouth. You know, that was a little scary. But within a matter of just a few minutes, somebody kind of slid up beside me, and it was one of the medics. It looked bad, and it scared me pretty bad, I guess. But you know, he kept telling me, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay." It's funny. One thing that has always stuck in my mind, in the midst of all of that, he had a white towel. And in the midst of all that confusion and him trying to talk to me and, you know, checking me out, I kept thinking, I couldn't get out of my mind, where did he get that white towel? I'd been in Vietnam a while at that point, and I hadn't seen any white towels.
We had these airplanes. They were designed to operate in a short area, and we take bladders of fuel or bundles of ammunition, whatever the Army or the Marines needed. It was out in the jungle. And we take and make what we call drop missions. Well, one time in particular, we had dropped ammunition, and the Army was surrounded. A detachment of them was surrounded, and they had chopped some of the bushes back, and we went in and made our drop, and we're going back to altitude, and one of the Army people was running across to where the thing stopped, and he stepped on a landmine, and it just was all over. But we had to sit there and watch that, you know. It's
The 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade ran up on combat soldiers from the north, and they were surrounded and pinned down. And this was the battle that started early November of '67. And my unit joined it about the 18th, 19th of November. This was the first time that a unit moved at night in the jungle. And as we got close to Hill 875 in Doctor, bodies was all around. The first man reached a body, stepped over, and said to the next one, body. The only thing we could do at night was hold on to one rucksack to this that was in front of him. And when he stepped over and said body, you were ready to step over and said body. Now, why was that? One, we didn't know if it was our body or enemy. But one thing we didn't take no chance on, that it would be booby trap.
We got a call one morning, and the military had discovered the bodies of 6 Green Beret soldiers that had been dead probably 2 weeks. So we took the highest ranking Army general from Saigon up to where this discovery had been made. And what it was the Viet Cong had captured these 6 Green Beret soldiers, took them out into the woods, and they made them strip their clothes off and fold them neatly. Took their Green Berets and put it on top of their little pile of clothes. They cut every one of them's throat and laid them down with their head right next to their clothes, and they were like toothpicks, 6 laying there together. And that's the way we found them. But after they looked at them, and everybody cried a little, we had to bag them up. Me and part of the crew and some of the volunteers from the Army. And now it's kind of hard to bag up people that's been deceased for 2 weeks, you know.
It's difficult to be in a situation where you see people being killed. We had 2 or 3 situations where our camp was attacked and where we killed some of the attackers. And then you had to go out and watch them. Someone was torn apart. We had one individual, when he fired a caliber 50 machine gun, you have what's tracer round, but it's phosphorus. And I guess if it burns at about 300 degrees centigrade, if it hits you, it sets you on fire. It just explodes. And so we had a couple of individuals that were hit by these rounds. And you'd have to steel yourself against it. So what you would do, you would try to act like it was a everyday occurrence, so to speak. If you let that get to you, then you couldn't effectively do what you're supposed to do. So in your mind, you let this be how life is. And it carried over to me to a degree. When I was down in Georgia, this old man, he stepped off the curb and the car hit him, must have knocked him 20 feet, just boom. And I recall prior to that, me seeing this dead body, I would have been rushed to him to see if the man's okay, wondering, what happened. I'd have had some feeling. The car hit this man and I had no feelings whatsoever. I had nothing, just got hit.
Once I got home after a few days, it was great. Everybody, small town. I was from Van Cleve, so very small town. So within 4 or 5 days, I think I'd seen everybody that lived there. But after a few days, and it's really hard to explain now. Looking back, Vietnam was all I could think about. All my friends were over there. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know what was happening to them. And I struggled a good bit after a few days with the fact that no one here seemed to be as interested in it as I was. And it hurt me in many respects that they didn't.
I returned home. There was no big fanfare. I came home as one individual. No big parade or nothing like that. Medical retired. May of 1969. That early September or late August, Hurricane Camille came through. Hurricane Camille made Hattiesburg look like a war zone. I slept through it. It didn't bother me.
People that have never been in the military can't relate to what they went through. The stress level that these young people are going through, when they come back, they are forced to keep it within because they have nobody to talk to that understands what they're talking about. I did a lot of counseling with these guys, and when I say counseling, I'm not talking about me talking, I'm talking about listening to them tell me what they took me as a comrade in arms because I was in the military, and they would tell me things that they couldn't possibly tell their wife or their parents or anybody else. It got to a point that when we had a welcome home in Fort Collins, Colorado, it was hard. These people it was like a family. It didn't make any difference what branch of service you were in or what you did. All the special forces came together. You had to be there to see that, only because they knew that when they spoke to somebody, that person understood what they had been through. And they felt comfortable in that environment.
Well, I landed in San Francisco, and then I come to Mississippi for 30 days before I went to my next duty station. And San Francisco was bad as far as the protesters, you know. But one of my favorite things in the food line is milk. I missed it bad in Vietnam. For a year, no milk. And I had got me a quart of milk and was sitting on a park bench in San Francisco by the airport drinking that quart of milk. And the people come by, and the only thing said to me was, you didn't have to go without milk. Could have stayed home, you know. But you really can't stay at home. You gotta do what you gotta do.
The more that the media processed all these protesters and whatnot, it made them want to clam up. It wasn't for fear, but they wanted to be accepted. They didn't want to be known as a Vietnam vet. They didn't want to know anybody to know what they had done. They wanted to keep it all a secret. A lot of those people back then did not want to join the VFW or the Legion because they were faced with people from World War II or Korea that had not been through the same situation.
I've had some visits to the VA hospital in Jackson, and when you see those people and the Vietnam veterans, more so than anybody else, always try to wear something that displays where they were, you know. And a lot of those guys are bitter because of the public, the media, after the Vietnam War, talking about that it was a political war and we didn't need to be there, and we lost all these people for nothing, and you know, and they say, especially if you see a guy with a limb missing, an arm or a leg or foot or whatever, you know. I wouldn't have had to lose my foot if it hadn't been a political war going on. And of course, consequently, they're bitter.
The protests that I saw mostly were from college students, and mostly white college students that were protesting against the war and against the draft. I remember being in the airport and white college kids calling me baby killers and these type of things. But this was when I returned from Vietnam. And of course, they encouraged us then, told us to stop wearing our uniforms when we flew, because of the animosity and the protests and venom that was heaped your way. And I think one of the things that happened was when Martin Luther King got this hold of it, and he protested the war. I think the whole thing changed, and then it was real full-blown because he had legitimate protests to start with. I was in Atlanta airport, and he was passing through, and he saw me, and we were just standing there. And I said, oh man, I guess he's gonna give me the devil about being in. I was in uniform. And he just said, son, he said, are you going or coming? And I said, I'm coming back, sir. He said, well, thank God we got you back. And that's all he said, and kept going.
When I first visited the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, in many respects, I think was a turning point. We got to Washington, and as I really had no desire to go all that time, but now that I'm there, I want to go now, you know. And so we checked into the hotel and immediately got a cab, went over there. Got out to Lincoln Memorial and kind of walked down the hill there on the side where the statues are. And I probably stayed there by the statues for 45 minutes. My wife walked down there. But I had a hard time kind of making that commitment to walk down that hill. Eventually, I did go down there. But that walk down that hill to the base, that's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. So that would have been 92 maybe. So I had like 22 years worth of stuff. But I left a lot of stuff there. I mean, when we left there that day, it was just as though I had left stuff there that I'd been carrying around a long time. I mean, it's just hard to explain how emotional it was.
In 1994, Dr. Andy Weiss at the University of Southern Mississippi asked me to come to speak to his class. And in 2000, they had a training course in country for those students, and they invited 3 veterans. And I was one of the veterans to go. This Vietnamese gentleman came up to me. He said that, you're American aggressor. And I said, you VC aggressor. And we laughed, and we exchanged names and units we was in. And he said, come, we celebrate. We celebrate survival. Couldn't nothing be more powerful than that. We celebrate survival. When you consider on the American side some 58,000, not to mention the millions of Vietnamese.